Please welcome Christian, if you want to sit here. Christian Taylor, David Chapman. We have with us Dany. Warm round of applause for Dany. And Florence. Thank you so much, Christian. This is such a wonderful film. Thank you for bringing all these different testimonies from veterans and French people in Normandy. It's a heartwarming film. It's a difficult film. There's a lot happening, and it's quite, I think for many people, myself for sure, you know, I think these days we know the big battles, we know the events, we know the facts. But I didn't know any of those stories. You know, it was interesting. For us, it was just an empty beach and their allies and the Americans fighting the Germans. But I think there's all these people living in Normandy was not something that we knew about or we heard about. And I think it's quite wonderful that you were able to interview all these young people at the time, all children, right? Christian, you mentioned early in the film that you discovered all of that too when you set foot in Normandy for the commemoration. Can you tell us what struck you when you arrived in Normandy?
I can, and I would love to. But first, can I just give you a standing ovation because you were the best audience ever. Thank you so much for laughing and crying. I felt such support from you, so thank you. Yes, so what struck me the most? Like I said in the beginning, I was blown away with how much everyone was thanking me. For what? I was just an American. But they would say thank you, and they would buy me meals, and they would treat me like I was royalty. And I was blown away because, as an American, I grew up thinking the French people hated Americans. Or that they were so snobby. Sorry. But I think in our American media, that's what we hear. So I realized that it was completely opposite from anything that I had ever experienced or heard about French people. And when I saw how they treated the veterans or the American military, I was blown away.
And what made you want to make a film?
No one had ever made a World War II film from this perspective. I was a mom. I went to Normandy. I saw love. I saw an incredible amount of love, not war. And I was so curious as to how had that happened. And I'd never seen any story like that before. So I thought somebody had to do it. I went back to all of my production friends in Chicago, and I said, we really have to make this movie. Can you please make this movie? And everybody said, yeah, you should make the movie. And I thought, oh, well, how hard can a documentary be? So it was very hard.
And that was your first film?
That was my first film, yeah. Thank you.
And love is definitely palpable in your film, and it's quite wonderful to bring back the human connections between veterans and people in the region as well. And Dany, your memories are so vivid. Is that something you think about often?
En français.
En français?
No. Tu nécessites...
Yeah, no, I need to translate.
Yeah.
Est-ce que vos souvenirs sont très vivides? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose auquel vous pensez souvent?
Je dois parler dans le micro peut-être.
Yeah, you can speak in your microphone and we'll translate.
Voilà.
Okay, I can do that, yes.
Okay. Oui, j'étais très petite à l'époque, bien sûr, mais la mémoire des enfants commence dès 4 ans.
Oh, yeah.
Donc il y a des choses dont je me souviens vraiment.
Yeah, I was very young at the time, but memories start early when you're young, around 4 years old.
Yes.
So
Et donc j'avais 5 ans au débarquement, et il y a des choses dont je me souviens vraiment, comme le parachutage, par exemple.
So I was 5 years old when the Allies came, and I remember things very well, like the parachutes.
Oui. C'était la nuit, très tôt, et quand maman a entendu des avions, elle a ouvert la fenêtre de la chambre.
It was night, it was early, and when my mother heard them, she opened the windows.
Et on y voyait comme dans le jour, parce qu'il y avait plein de petits parachutes avec au bout des lumières, des fusées, qui éclairaient tellement pour que l'on puisse voir, que les parachutistes, puissent voir à peu près là où ils tombaient.
And it was like daylight because most of the parachutes were equipped with light, so the soldiers can see and the parachutists could see.
Et lorsque mon papa, qui était revenu d'Angleterre car il ne voulait pas être sous le régime de Vichy, il est allé rejoindre de Gaulle. Et donc, il nous a vus à la fenêtre. C'était dangereux car depuis l'église, il y avait des Allemands qui tiraient sur les parachutistes.
So my dad had escaped to England because he didn't want to live under the Vichy regime, and he had joined the Gould, and he came back and saw my mom and I by the windows, and it was dangerous because the Germans was actually shooting from the church.
Alors il nous a pris par les épaules, il nous a tirés en arrière et il a vite fermé la fenêtre pour éviter tout danger, bien sûr.
And so he pulled us back by our shoulders and quickly closed the window so we would be safe.
Alors on peut dire aussi que nous nous sommes endormis allemands et nous nous sommes réveillés américains.
Yeah, we can say that we fell asleep as Germans and we woke up as Americans.
Car durant 4 ans, nous avons entendu les clous, les bottes allemandes qui faisaient beaucoup de bruit. Et nous nous sommes réveillés avec les chaussures américaines qui étaient toutes douces.
For 4 years, we lived in an environment with boots and the clinking of the boots on the ground. And we woke up with the American shoes that were soft. I have a hard time to believing this, but that were softer.
Oui. Et il y a aussi beaucoup d'autres choses, mais bon, ce serait trop long d'expliquer tout cela. Mais une chose est vraie, c'est qu'au premier anniversaire du débarquement, ma maman a voulu absolument honorer les Américains en me faisant une petite robe que vous avez vue dans le film.
So a lot happened during this time, a lot to say, but I would say that a year later, for the first anniversary, my mom wanted to do something special and put together this little dress that you could see in the film.
Et il y avait beaucoup de parachutes qui traînaient à droite, à gauche, de couleur rouge, de couleur blanche.
And a lot of parachutes were laying around, of white parachutes and red parachutes.
Et donc, elle m'a confectionné une petite robe aux couleurs de l'emblème américain. Je vais vous la faire voir.
So she made a little dress
Oui.
of the colors of the
Je
flag.
vous explique d'abord. J'avais 6 ans au premier anniversaire du débarquement. Et donc, maman m'a fait une petite robe et je l'ai offerte au musée d'Utah Beach.
And so my mom made this little dress. I was 5 and offered it to the memorial of Utah Beach. Beach.
Oui. Et entre 6 ans et 8 ans, il y avait tous les ans des commémorations. J'avais grandi, je ne pouvais plus mettre la petite robe. Et ma maman en a confectionné une seconde, identique, toujours dans du parachute rouge et blanc.
And as I grew, and it was part of this commemoration, I grew, but I didn't fit the dress, but my mom made another one, also with parachutes. Yeah, and here it is.
And just to explain, there were many colors of parachutes that came down during the Battle of Normandy. The red ones brought machinery and weapons. The white ones were either medical, so they were thicker and they were I don't know what it's made out of, nylon. The reserve chutes were white and they were silk. But there were blue, there were green, there were yellow, and every single one of them delivered different supplies. And that's a small unknown fact here in the United States that I learned in Normandy.
Pardon.
Non, allez-y.
Posez-moi des questions.
And we see you in the film at different commemorations. No, but I need to speak to these people. I'll translate for you. We see you in the film at different commemorations, and were you able to see the soldiers that you interacted with when you were young?
Ah oui. Oui, pendant des années, nous avons eu évidemment des Américains que nous avions reçus à la maison.
Est-ce que tu en as revu pendant les commémorations qui étaient chez toi quand ils étaient petits?
Oui, j'en ai revu durant quelques fois parce qu'ils sont partis malheureusement sur d'autres fronts.
Yeah. So many of them, the soldiers that you met went back to the other fronts, right?
Non, ils ne sont pas jamais revenus. Est-ce que on n'a jamais plus de nouvelles d'eux, sauf de Harry Kropnicki? Oui, mes parents ont correspondu longtemps avec.
So your parents were in correspondence with one of the soldiers.
Oui,
yeah.
oui.
Harry, yeah.
Mais après, on les a perdus de vue. Bon, la vie a continué d'une manière différente pour chacun. Yeah. Hélas.
And then after that, we lost track of them. Yeah. There.
But just to add a detail, I did learn that Harry Kropnicki, Tall, Larry, and Smitty were all military police. So the reason that her family was able to make such a close relationship with them was because they were part of the sustainment forces at Utah Beach. Utah Beach had a gooseberry port, and so there were over 1 million men and machines that came in through the port of Utah Beach and then joined the Red Ball Highway and went on to the front. So those MPs stayed in the town to help with that, and that's why they spent so many dinners and things with her family. Once we came on this project, I wanted to find Harry Kropnicki, Big Smith, Tall Smitty, and whatever, Tall Larry and Smitty. And I could only find Harry Kropnicki. But I did find Harry Kropnicki. He was buried in Florida. I told Dany. She wrote him a card based on 1944 paper. And I went to Florida with some of our team, found a World War II veteran, and we had a ceremony for Harry Kropnicki that we videoed for Dany and then showed it to her to tell him thank you.
Very nice.
Mais nous avons eu le plaisir, alors qu'ils étaient encore en France et à Sainte-Marie-du-Mont en particulier, ils étaient toujours à la maison. Ils mangeaient toujours à la maison. Oui. C'était la famille.
We had the pleasure of having them a lot at home. They would come and have lunch and dinner with us, and they were part of the family.
Ah oui, oui. Et bon, par contre, je vais revenir un petit peu maintenant. Toutes ces commémorations, tous ces événements dont vous me faites l'honneur, eh bien, cela m'a permis de rencontrer des gens formidables comme David Chapman, que j'ai eu l'occasion de connaître lors d'une commémoration justement à Sainte-Mère. Et puis beaucoup d'autres, des messieurs que j'ai rencontrés ce soir, de comment... Aide-moi, je suis émue. Voilà, des personnes.
I think over the years, participating in those commemorations and being here tonight, it's been a wonderful opportunity to meet people like David Chapman and also people tonight. Yeah.
Voilà, j'ai eu aussi l'occasion de rencontrer des personnes d'énormément quand même, hein, avec Virginie, et qui maintenant habite les États-Unis avec son époux Dany. C'est des personnes superbes. Nous avons eu l'occasion aussi de rencontrer Dany, et non pas Dany. Dany et son épouse, que j'ai eu l'occasion de rencontrer. C'est formidable, des gens très, très, très sympathiques et très gentils.
And meeting people like Virginie, who lives in the United States now with her husband, and also Donny Edwards, who's here with us, and his wife. We're wonderful, nice people.
Mais je vais forcément en oublier, mais je vois Tina et je vois Véronique. Et donc, ce sont des gens vraiment gentils et chaleureux. Je ne m'attendais pas à autant d'honneur quand même. Merci surtout à tous les vétérans qui restent encore et qui restent encore longtemps, le plus longtemps possible en vie. Merci.
All warm and wonderful people, and a special thanks for veterans for being here this evening and all they've done.
Merci de tout cœur. Thank you so much.
And you, David, you're so in the film you're based in Paris already. You work for the U.S. Embassy, but you have a story behind your involvement in the film.
Do you want me to tell it?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting story. I was in the Army for 30 years. And at the very front of that time, I went to a really difficult school called Ranger School. It's a leadership school, doesn't matter. But you get very close with your team there, much like in combat. It's supposed to be so hard that it emulates combat minus some of the horrors of it. And my best friend from that time is a gentleman by the name of Mark Janessi. Mark did his time, got out of the Army, and went about his way. And I guess it was about 25 years later, Mark's daughter and Christian's son went to homecoming dance. This is in Chicago, Illinois, near Chicago, not even related to where I am. And I believe it was over conversation when the parents meet, overseeing the kids' activities, that she brought up this film and talked to Mark about the film. And ultimately she said, hey, do you know anybody in Paris, France, maybe in the military? Well, I happen to be the senior defense official at the U.S. Embassy in Paris. And he said, as a matter of fact, I do. So he connected Christian to me, and it is a funny story. When you're in that position, you get a lot of phone calls, you get a lot of people asking for things, and it's all good, but you just don't have time for everything. But because it was Mark and my close friend from a long time ago, an old Army buddy, I took the call. And Christian had the trailer for the film done at the time, and I watched it, and I was hooked immediately. And I said, what do you need? Within my authority, let me help you get this done. So that was how it started.
And it turned out that his office was the exact office that handled the D-Day commemorations.
A little bit of luck there, too.
Yeah, and thankfully, you see him jump out of the parachute. We don't say this, but it's his last jump. What you just saw at Lafayette was his very last jump as a paratrooper. And so we were able to film that. His daughter was there, his wife was there, and he got a special permission to be at the drop zone. So that would never have happened without David.
Yeah, you can't tell, but my wife is in a cameo, and my little daughter's in a cameo. Can I tell them the story with Bob Devaney? All right. I told a couple of people before this. So there's a really moving scene when, genuinely, as soon as I came off the drop zone, Christian ran over and put a mic on me, which is fine. My wife and daughter, I think, were mic'd up too. Ever the filmmaker. And so I came up to greet Bob Devaney, and we had this heartfelt moment about how we did it for them, and it truly was absolutely off the cuff. But there was a helicopter in the background because someone had gotten injured, and we had this really great moment together, and I hugged him, and I said, thanks, for what you do. And then Christian said, that's great. Can you do all that again? Because there's a helicopter back there. So I am not a trained actor, but I did repeat it all, and Bob repeated it all. And that's what you saw in film, was the second take, if you will, of that emotional moment. It's truly sentimental, but it was a second take. Please don't share that.
You can't tell. But you yourself were in the Army for about 30 years, right? And I was wondering, because you watched the film again tonight, and could you tell us what it means to you to see the veterans there and to hear the French people talk about what happened, how they lived through it? And the veterans, I think it's a beautiful part in the film, Christian, when you talk about the difficulty for them to come back, which, I think we don't speak so much about. We always feel like just going back is a great honor, and you would be happy to go back. But I think the difficulty to grapple with what happened. What did it mean to you to see these films and to hear these stories, David?
Well, I can tell you that again, 30 years in the Army, I've lived in or been in 8 different countries. Actually, lived and spent a lot of time in foreign countries. I learned more from the making of this film and the process of speaking with these veterans over the time than I did anywhere in any other place, simply because you were sharing something that you just can't describe it. When someone goes through something like that, like they did at such an early age, they go home, they go back to the farm or the city or wherever they go, and they go into their life. And then decades go by, and finally they return. And you saw a couple of examples of this where they didn't know what to expect, but as soon as they're on the ground and all the adulation comes out and the love, it truly does become a love story. And I learned more about humanity from watching that than any other place in any other time in the world.
I'd like to say a related thing. In terms of what the veterans feel like when they get back to the battlefield and how they process it, I too learned so much by listening to the veterans when they were there. But I also have a son that fought in Afghanistan and had a very traumatic experience. And I want you all to think for just a little minute. Think about something very awful and painful that happened to you. Just remember it and think about that pain. Now imagine if I came to you and I asked you to tell me every detail about that incident. You probably haven't thought about it for a long time. It probably still brings up the pain, and you'd probably prefer not to talk about it. Well, that's what we are asking the veterans to do, and that's why they never spoke when they came back. My son never did either, until one night, he had a very bad night at home and called me. And for whatever reason, he began to tell me of a story about being in Afghanistan in a guard post every day. And every day, this little boy on a bicycle, a red bike, would ride by at the same time every day. And over time, they developed a relationship. It was just waving of a hand. But it happened every day, over and over again. They would see each other, and they would wave. And one day, that little boy was riding by at his usual time, and some very bad men stopped a truck and jumped out and took him. And very bad things happen when bad men take little boys in Afghanistan. And Hunter knew that, and he was ready to take the men out and asked for permission and was denied. And he had to watch that happen and never see the little boy again. And that was the most painful, horrible thing that ever happened to him when he was serving overseas, and it haunts him to this day. But one day, for whatever reason, he told me. And then we talked about it another time. And as I listened and I asked more questions, it began to loosen its grip on him a little bit. And he began to share it with other people. And the healing began. And that's what happens in Normandy. And it's coupled with unbelievable love and gratitude. So you have those two things happening. The veterans sharing their stories, and then them being lavished with love. And that is a powerful, powerful thing that the French people do with those veterans. And I would encourage everyone to think about that when you talk to veterans of war. They're carrying some deep and heavy things. But your love, your gratitude, really genuinely showing it to them will begin the healing.
I didn't know that story. That's great.
That's a new one I threw at you.
Yeah. Because I haven't talked to anybody. I'm in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm married to a psychiatrist. And I don't talk to anybody
David, we have some work to do.
But I do understand deeply what these men are grieving for and then growing out of when they come through Normandy, and that's why I'm so passionate about it.
And you've been there many times, you said, right? And is that each time the same emotion as well for you? Is that just as, I would imagine, just as meaningful, but the same, emotion of going back and welcoming veterans and preparing, the festivities and the commemoration? And
I'll give you a little different perspective. I do get a lot of joy from that. I get more joy from the children. I really do. I think watching the children engage with the veterans is just the coolest thing. And how the veterans just light up, to see the kids, whether you speak the same language or it doesn't matter. And it just gives those folks another wonderful day on this earth to know that the gratitude is there, and especially from the children. So in the few minutes I got, that was about an hour interviews with Christian. She gave me like 38 seconds in the movie. I know how you got
You're not the only one. Hey, we couldn't sit here for 5 hours.
No, I did mention the children a lot because I really think the youth and understanding what's happening and what's taken place is so important. So it's a different perspective.
And I will say, too, I usually try to involve children in our screenings because it's wonderful for you to sit here and watch and listen and learn. But if you know high schoolers or middle schoolers, encourage them to see this film so that they can know and learn. That's a real passionate desire of mine for educating the younger generations.
And Dany?
Moi, je voudrais dire quelque chose quand même qui peut paraître de peu d'intérêt, mais vous autres parents qui êtes ici dans la salle et jeunes gens qui peuvent être aussi dans la salle, profitez, soyez heureux, ne vous plaignez pas, vous n'avez pas connu la guerre, vous avez tout ce qu'il vous faut, vous pouvez manger à votre faim, vous pouvez jouir de la vie dans le sens propre du mot, alors ne grognez surtout plus pour les petits bobos de la vie.
I would like to say something, a little something that may not seem significant, but for you who may have children in the audience, and if you have children, just to know that they can't complain and they can enjoy life, they can eat as they wish, and you can't complain and get over the little things that bother you because you haven't known and lived the war. Yes, yeah. I want to make sure
I'm sorry, one other thing.
Yeah.
Flo Boucherie is sitting here.
It's
Let me
my
introduce
daughter.
Flo Boucherie. She is my co-producer. This would never have been possible. This is Dany's daughter, but she's also my co-producer. So
give it around, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know.
And
I just want to tell just something. So when I met Christian, it was an amazing meeting because it was just because one picture. We were waiting for paratrooper landing and there was problem with the aircraft. So we are waiting for something. And there is soldier just behind me. So in front of me come. And in this group of guys, there is Hunter, Christian's son. And so I stopped the guy and say, can I take a picture? I say, oh yeah, of course, yes. So Hunter just was close to me and I asked him, it was your first day and your first time in Normandy? He said, yes, but I'm not alone. I'm with my mother and with my brother Jake. And so, okay, my family are here. They're my parents, my mother and my father and my mother. And so we start the meeting like this just only because a picture. If I stop the other group of the soldier, there is no movie.
I want to make sure we take some questions from the public. So if you want to raise your hand high, I can call you. And we have microphones, so make sure you wait for microphones to get to you so we can hear you clearly and record as well.
Thank you for taking me because I have to go soon. But, what I wanted to say, first of all, it was a wonderful film. Yeah. But one thing I want to say that I'm one of the children who was saved, okay? But I was saved in southern France. I was saved by the by the Americans. On 1944, I was a hidden child, a Jewish child, so near between Grasse and Cannes. And one day, suddenly we see, I was in the countryside where I was hidden in this farm, and all those, planes came, and there were all that flowers coming down. We're coming, And of course, they're coming. The only thing is that before they were coming, very next to us, there was a reservoir of German armament, which they blew away just before leaving, and we managed to survive. But the next day, we got up and we went to Les Quatre Chemins, and here were all the American soldiers, and we, yes, I also had my dress, but white, blue, and red, and done in different ways, and we just kissed each other. And I was 7 years old, and the soldiers just embraced us, and we all cried together, and it was something wonderful. And then I just wanted to add, my future adoptive parents invited them the next day, and they all came, and they were talking about their families in America. They were talking about their loves and their children, and it was so moving. And the thing I just want to add is that one of them had a pair of gloves for his fiancée in America, and who he loved so much, and asked my adoptive mother to send it to her. And what happened was that, amazingly, a decade later, when I happened to be, at that time I was being a guide for Americans, and there was this lady who happened to be the woman who had gotten those gloves, but he had never returned. And I want to I'm also to cry, when I think about it. He was such a nice man. And that's what I wanted to say. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you. That's a gift. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, first, I think every person in this theater can do a great service to the nation by encouraging every little child you meet to smoke a Camel cigarette.
Good point.
Secondly, at Columbia University, we have undergraduates who come to the school. To my great surprise and disdain, they don't know a damn thing about the war. They've never heard of Churchill, let alone de Gaulle, or they've heard of Roosevelt, but if you ask them what do they know, they've just heard the name. So my question to our honorees is, are French youth knowledgeable about the war? Do they know about it? And is it taught in school? It's clearly not taught here. By the time they leave Columbia, they're writing papers about the war, and they've learned a great deal. But do French children know about it, or French young people know about it?
I can talk about that. It varies, just like in America. So in America, you have people that do love history, and so they do teach their children. In France, in Normandy, there is a lot more knowledge about the war than there is in other cities. I have been told by French officials that they wish this was shown in French schools because most of the kids do not know the history. So I think it's the young generations in general that don't know. It doesn't really matter what country. I went around the United States, though, asking people randomly about D-Day. Do you know what D-Day is or when it was? And the only people that knew were 2 German tourists in Las Vegas.
It's a great video if you catch it on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
It's not great.
Go to our
it's
YouTube
funny.
channel. Yeah,
It's
sad,
it's
but
sad,
true.
but it's funny.
Yes. And next, who's got a question? Yeah.
I'm of retirement age, and I'm getting back to the value of early childhood education. And because if we place our attention on a generation that's just growing up, and as Plato said, give them some love, nurturing, and encouragement, and allow that natural sort of like creative life seed to grow and develop naturally, a child would naturally grow into a loving, compassionate being with a meaningful contribution to make. So what do you think about children have come up and placing our attention on bringing up a generation of children, because the most creative, talented people should be the teachers, and they are helping to mold and shape the lives of a future generation. So what do you think, particularly that the military might be able to do to make a meaningful contribution, like situation awareness, for instance, things like that? Or what do you think about that? Or what do you think an adult can learn from a child? I know it's a lot of stuff, but okay, thank you so much.
That's a tough one.
You, David.
I can tell, and I'll go back to my military experience. I can tell you that military children are probably a bit more worldly and know a little bit more about these things simply because it's in the interest of their parents. But the military as an institution tends to stay out of early childhood education or education in general, with the exception of the schools that are on military bases, which teaches to the standard curriculum. So I don't know if there's a linkage between the institution of the Department of Defense and our children, but I can tell you within those who serve, our children tend to be more knowledgeable. I shouldn't say worldly, that's not right, accurate, but more knowledgeable about these things. I can tell you my daughter is.
And I can tell you it starts with us. It starts with us. Each individual. There are children in our lives. Whether they're grandchildren or actual children or their nieces and nephews or there's a neighbor, it starts with us. We can't wait for the government to solve it or the schools to solve it. So think about the children that you know in your life. Spend time with them. Treat them like I talk about treating the adults in the movie. Take them places. Read books to them. Teach them about the history and the history you think they should know. It's up to us to train that next generation. And I watched that example in Normandy. Take them to cemeteries. Teach them about their ancestors. At the grave sites, place flowers. Celebrate and remember on our holidays, not at a party or a picnic, but go to a cemetery, remember a soldier, go to a veteran's home. Do you know how many are forgotten in the retirement homes? Go and visit there. They're filled with veterans that people have forgotten. It starts with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's actually a good place to close the discussion, but I think you wanted to call someone also. Give the floor to someone.
Yes. So we are wrapping up. And before we do, there are two important things that I need to say. One, when you leave, you will be getting a card with the Girl Who Wore Freedom website on it. You can stream the movie or buy the movie, and you can buy a DVD. Please share that. You are helping to pay for the film. It's not yet paid for, and if anybody wants to make a donation, you can do that on our website as well. We have a podcast called Documentary First that talks about all the behind-the-scenes stories from the beginning. We interview veterans. There's a great one, George Champa. We did 5 weeks with him. He was with the Grave Registration Service. There's lots of wonderful things to discover on the Documentary First podcast, also on our website. So please go and check it out. Tell your friends. Now, something very important is coming up. May 31st, we are having a World War II dinner, recognition dinner in Atlanta, sponsored by Michelin, in partnership with Delta Airlines, because the next day, Delta is chartering a flight with 30 World War II veterans all the way to Normandy for a whole week of festivities to honor them. This is only possible because of the Best Defense Foundation. And the Best Defense Foundation is started and headed up by Dany Edwards, who I introduced earlier. And Dany, I cannot thank you enough for helping make this dream come true. Come on up. I think your motto at Best Defense Foundation is serving those that served us. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, close. It's taking care of the ones who took care of us.
There you go.
Taking care of the ones who took care of us.
So tell us about your vision and why you do what you do.
Well, this is pretty amazing. My name is Dany Edwards. I'm a former NFL player. I know I don't look like a linebacker, but I used to be one. I play one on TV. No, but actually, I'm so blessed to have this opportunity, this platform to serve our military veterans, and especially our oldest military veterans, our World War II veterans. We have one up here. Arthur, are you up there? Can you wave your hand up there? Arthur Grabanay. We had opportunity to take Arthur back a couple times now to their battlefields, and you know exactly what that meant for you to go back to Pearl Harbor this past December. We talk about it all the time, and you have great memories, and it means so much, and I know that. And that's why we do that, right? There's Arthur right there, yeah. But you know what, the story keeps going, right? So we're continuing the story of giving these veterans an opportunity to make sure that they connect with the liberated. Give them an opportunity going back on different terms, going back with their brothers and sisters, so they can participate in the ceremonies, the celebrations, the gratitude by the French people, and so much more. And it's a great deal to be able to bring 30 World War II veterans. A total of 80 veterans are going to be going back on this special program coming up. So with the partnership of Delta and Michelin, and all bringing it all together with the Girl Who Wore Freedom. I mean, this is what it's all about, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm stunned. I know it's not been easy, that it's very challenging to put together this mission. It takes a lot of foot soldiers to do that. It also takes a lot of resources. And they are still taking donations every day to help these World War II veterans get back. So if you can find it in your heart to make a donation, how do they do that?
Go to our website. It's just bestdefensefoundation.org or bdf.org. We're all volunteers. We're all just paying it forward. And our why is pure. It's because of the men and women that serve. We want to give back, and it's incredible that we have so many people that are giving so much to make things happen. And with your support, we're able to do more of this and to give more veterans like Arthur and his son there, Doug, an opportunity to go back to their battlefields.
Thank you. There's another veteran back in the back. I'd like to recognize his name. Can you please yell out your name and where you fought?
What?
Your name and where you fought.
Carl Trignali, Brooklyn, New York.
And where did you fight? What, were you with the Army?
Navy.
Navy. And were you in Pearl Harbor?
Atlantic and the Pacific.
Pacific, okay. Great. Thank you so much for being here. One other thing is, if you are flying Delta or Air France, the film is now there, so you can watch it there or tell your friends to. And if you are not flying Delta or Air France, you are making a mistake. So please make sure your next flight is with Delta and Air France. So thank you very much. Dave, thank you very much for coming this evening. We really appreciate it. I'll see you outside. You can see a parachute from Normandy, Invasion Money. We have a DVD out there for sale, as well as books that I wrote. So thank you very much.
Right on. And in 2 weeks, we'll be taking that flight over, that chartered flight with Delta Airlines, all the way flying directly into Deauville with 30 World War II veterans. So the story continues, and we'll continue to do it.